Have you ever heard of a photographer who deliberately ended his career because he was so consumed or obsessed with what he was photographing? If not, meet Eugene Smith and his project, the beloved city of Pittsburgh. But let's not jump into conclusions here, because just like black and white, there's a numerous line of different shades and tones and etc. From the blackest of blacks to the whitest of whites. This story is also full of layers, and we need a lot of context. I would recommend you to watch my full video on Eugene Smith if you haven't already. It's somewhere in the channel. I'll leave it linked here. But today, for this story, for this project, we're going to be diving deep into this book right here, Dream Street by Sam Stevenson, who actually we've seen another book of his here on the channel, curiously enough as well, around the work of Eugene Smith, in this case the Jazz Loft project. And you're welcome to check out that video as well, because today what we're going to see is this basically diving into a book that reunites sort of like the intentions of, that Eugene Smith had for this project that he, heads up, never really finished it. And so we're going to see some important aspects of, how this project came to be, some images and etc. But for now, grab a drink, just like I have mine here, and make yourself comfortable, because we're going to dive into a video, in this case, episode 14 of our ongoing series, Books. In today's video, we're starting sort of in media res, like the Latin saying. And we're actually going back to March 1955, when a younger Eugene Smith, who has finally cut ties with Life magazine, is bounded for Pittsburgh to complete his first freelance assignment as a member of Magnum Photos. He was going to work for Stephen Loran, a historian and editor who found odd that the photographer he had hired to work for 3 weeks, producing images for an upcoming book commemorating the city's bicentennial, was arriving with some 20 pieces of luggage, a record player with hundreds of records and books. Smith had gained by this time a reputation for, to put it mildly, being difficult, but it was beyond Lauren's dreams what would happen next. And in fairness, Smith was also somewhat oblivious to how far and how long of a spin this ride would take him for. He spent the first 3 weeks wandering the city and reading about its history, barely taking any photographs by the 3-week mark. Quoting from Dream Street, the book we're seeing today, there was a clear divergence between how the responsible for the book saw the city as going through a period of rebirth, coming from a past heavily industrialized image to a buzzing, optimistic melting pot of cultures, which fell in line with the hope the 50s represented in the American society and in history. Smith, however, saw the city as, quote, everything emanated from the riverbanks, which had stunned early European explorers with their natural beauty, but which in 1955 were covered with factories, mills, and railroad tracks as far as Smith could see. The haunting and paradoxical events of the modern world were on full display in Pittsburgh. The glory and despair, production and destruction, past and present, human and machine, the individual and the collective, the natural and the man-made. All these Smith called the equilibriums of paradox. And so I feel as though, judging by first impressions and by what I just told you of the different narratives that basically the city wanted to be said and how Eugene Smith saw things, we can definitely tell that this wasn't going to end well. However, after some time, I believe after a couple of months, Smith did deliver, some negatives so that the city archive and etc. they could produce the book that they wanted. But he continued to work, just by himself. And Magnum didn't really realize what had gone on until, I believe, several months later. And their first instinct was to try and help him to finish off whatever he had started. And so they sent, someone to assist him, and this person ended up being with Eugene Smith, working day and night for 2 years. And during this period of 2 years, basically, it's a very dark period where his life professionally and personally were kind of falling apart. Smith had developed this very difficult reputation, and we know that in business, people want things to be quite fast and quite efficient, and people don't want very difficult, especially if you have to deliver, you have deadlines and etc. So you need to be efficient. And that wasn't the case. Now, that doesn't mean by any chances that Smith wasn't a great photographer at all. He just wasn't great at, just sticking to deadlines. But other than that, this was a very special moment in his life because there was a lot of turmoil. And following this period in Pittsburgh, of course, Magnum, and he just had amounted a lot of debt and etc. And then he kind of ceased his relationship with them, and he ended up in an apartment in Manhattan's Flower District, which wasn't necessarily a great area to live as in the 1950s, at least from what I could tell and read and etc. However, this might shock you because the Pittsburgh project would actually end up being published as a short essay titled Labyrinthian Walk in a publication by Popular Photography magazine, for which Eugene Smith got paid nearly $2,000, a sum that was much lower than the initial propositions he received from other magazines for $20,000 and more, which he never accepted because he wouldn't agree on not having editorial control, which, to be honest, wasn't very common at the time. However, not everything is gloom and doom. If there is one thing that Eugene Smith is extremely prolific at, in my opinion, is on effectively communicating ideas or feelings through his images. And so when I look at the beginning of this book, and the editor here followed indications left by Smith as close as he possibly could, we see these 4 particular images that I would like us to pay attention to. The first 2 being compositions where people are like tiny specks engulfed by the surrounding landscape. In this case, we see in this first picture the houses in the back, the electrical poles, which are quite imposing, the car, and in the second picture, it's the same pattern. The size of the house is quite imposing to that of the people, which tells us first and foremost that whatever we're about to see, it's not just about the people, it's what surrounds them. In this case, we learn later, is the city of Pittsburgh. And if we look in the next pages, we have 2 men that almost seem locked behind gates, which combined with the image we see on the side of a lonely figure walking amidst the gigantic railroad tracks, gives us again a great sense of the city and people as almost non-existent, which speaks to Eugene Smith's intention of capturing the paradoxes between man and machine, individual and collective, and these are effective ways of composing around these ideas by using scale, depth of field, contrasting textures, lines, and above all, intention. So with this book, we get to know the intention behind these images, and so as photographers we can learn with Eugene Smith on how to communicate exactly how we see or feel about something through images, which is not as easy as it sounds. And I have to point out as well that these are very common motives when we look throughout the book. Another example of this is this beautiful, highly contrasted image, which I believe was taken in a restaurant, where people gave place to silhouettes, or later when he was confronted with very contrasting ideas of chaos and relaxation within the same frame. In talking about chaos and relaxation, we all know what these things look like, but what does it actually sound like? Well, we might have our ideas, but I'm sure we won't know more about sound and music than today's sponsor, Tunetank. Because Tunetank is a platform where you can find music and sound effects to suit all moods, genres, and themes. And once you open Tunetank's website, you'll find that all their music catalog is organized in a way that makes it easier to rapidly find what you're looking for. And if you've been watching the channel, you probably know that I'm super particular with the music and sound effects that I use in my videos. And so I can tell you that all the music I used for today's video is from Tunetank, and they own all the rights for their music, so you don't have to be afraid of someone copyright claiming the music in your videos. Personally, I think two of Tunetank's main advantages is one, their system for free removal of copyright claims, which is very simple and effective, and second, their free monthly downloads. That's right, every month Tunetank allows their users who have an account to download any 3 tracks from their website and use them in any number of videos, which is great if you want to trial out the platform, trial out different music options for your videos without any obligations. And if you want to know more, check out Tunetank's website and also their reviews on Trustpilot to learn about other people's experiences and what they've used Tunetank for. Links to Tunetank are down below, and I'd like to thank them so much for helping me keeping up the channel by sponsoring the videos. Now, as I was going through this book, it actually gave me an idea, not so much to look just deeply into the book, but actually look at a bigger picture here. And it's something funny because in my one-to-one sessions with different people, we often discuss about getting their projects out there and how do we go about starting a project, layering a project, or kind of sequencing a project in this case. And so this, I think, can be very helpful, this book, and I'd recommend it to a lot of people already. But basically, when I looked at this book, there was a lot of different sections, one dedicated to children, another one dedicated to more sort of not landscape, but more like cityscape. Another one dedicated to work, in this case more industrial work, and in a different one we would have work but tied in more with the idea of rebirth of the city. So there's a lot of different let's say sub-themes to the main theme, which is, or subject, which is the idea of the city of Pittsburgh. And so this can be extremely helpful to look at books like this, breaking them down and trying to find almost like sub-themes within what the photographer is showing us, so that we can ourselves as well organize our ideas. And how do we go about starting a project and organizing said project? Let's start with this example. Say the subject of your book is not always going to remain static. It's not always going to appear the same. And if we say that the subject of your book, it's actually a building, it's definitely going to look different at every light. So with that in mind, once you have an idea of what you want your project to be about, set out to identify its potential ramifications and photograph them. Returning to the example of the building, you'll probably quickly identify that you need to record it through the different days, different seasons, potential holidays. What does it look like occupied? What does it look like empty? So the different variations of the same subject. And in this book, we have the city of Pittsburgh. And before photographing it, Smith read about it and did some research, which probably gave him some ideas. But then he realized that he had to capture the different sides of the city, the different groups of its people, celebrations, and the other events taking place in the city. Places of work, places of worship, or leisure. So these are all ramifications of a main subject, and if you find yourself overwhelmed by the whole subject in itself, whether you're trying to photograph your family or perhaps your small town or your country, then break it into parts or characteristics, and by doing that you'll probably get a better sense of direction, and you can use that as a conducting line. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just hope this was helpful in any way, shape, or form. I just feel like I wanted to make this note because I myself have struggled with this. Sometimes it can be quite daunting when you have an idea and it can be quite enthralling. You can be lost in it, or it can be quite complex. And so how do you go about organizing the theme or subject or your ideas in order to photograph them with intention or just simply going about it? It doesn't matter if you're someone who composes more carefully, if you're someone who's more carefree, so it doesn't really matter here. The point is that, you know, it's easier to perhaps sometimes, depending of course on what your situation is, to break down the whole into little parts and identify these constituents of this sort of group or landscape, or you know, if it's a geographical point like your small town or a country or etc., group of people, it doesn't matter. It's just about maybe creating a better picture and having a better idea, doing research about what you're going to photograph, because I think it can give you a better, like I said, a more clear idea of what you're photographing and how you're going to capture it. But yeah, I mean, another example that comes to mind is someone like Alex Soth, who I've actually done a video here on the channel as well, and he talked about when he was working on Sleeping by the Mississippi. He had a map and he just followed that map. So he was kind of setting himself boundaries in terms of like physical boundaries in this case, but he knew he wanted to capture, you know, activities, people, landscape, etc. So different parts, like I said, different constituent parts of a whole. And yeah, I hope this was helpful in any way, shape or form. I wanted to thank you so much for watching. Links to my, you know, social media, book, etc. is all down below. I won't bore you with that, but I will say though, don't forget to check out the sponsor of today's video, Tunetank, who I really have to thank for giving me, you know, a vote of confidence here on the channel. I had a lot of fun picking music for my video, and you know, if you're, you know, a member or you've been watching the channel for a long time, that I'm very particular about music and about sounds in my videos. And so this was very, very cool, the opportunity to work with them. So check them out down below. And if you have any questions, you want to check out any more information, I'm sure they can clear all of that in their website. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. I hope I'll see you soon here on the channel, because I'll be posting more videos. This might be the last video of the year here, so happy new year to you if you're watching this. It's still December for me, and I'll hope to see you in the new year. So take care, stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, and I'm out. Peace.